Dewbs and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Dewbs and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Are you familiar with that song from Shaggy, It Wasn't Me? Well, that is the latest excuse when it comes to government emails. Suella Braverman saying it wasn't her that wrote the letter, the email that basically criticised many, including the civil servants of this country, saying that they are basically an activist blob. It's all blown up now. People are calling for her to be disciplined or investigated and whatnot. Should she be? Your thoughts on that? And Boris Johnson, he is absolutely raking it in. Many, though, are saying that he's taking the mickey out of Parliament because, get this, he's only spoken 16 times there since September. What should we do with Boris Johnson? Well, keep it clean, but give me your thoughts on that. And Joe Biden, he's got plans when it comes to billionaires. He wants to tax them more. What do you reckon? Should we copy him and tax the wealthy more in this country? And are you a man? Are you partial to a bit of tendency to brag among fellow men about your sexual conquest? Be careful if you are indeed one of them, because misogyny laws, this time over in Scotland, could see you, if it all happens and comes to pass, you could be in prison for many years. So you better watch yourself, boys. That's all I can say to you. We'll have all of that to come with 2 of my favourites tonight. You've got to wait, though, to see who they are, because right now we're going to catch up with all the latest headlines.
Good evening. It is 1 minute past 6. I'm Rory Smith in the GB newsroom. The Transport Secretary says construction of HS2 between Birmingham and Crewe will be delayed by 2 years. Mark Harper says it is due to increased costs and significant inflationary pressure. But Labour says the delay means the North has to pay the price for government failures. Gary Lineker has been accused of diminishing the tragedy of the Holocaust, with the Home Secretary saying she found his comments offensive. Earlier this week, the BBC presenter compared the government's language around its new immigration policy to that used by Germany in the 1930s. He has described the fallout as ridiculously out of proportion. The BBC is under some pressure to sack the former England striker, but today he confirmed he will be presenting Match of the Day on Saturday. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser told the Commons the broadcaster must maintain impartiality.
As somebody whose grandmother escaped Nazi Germany in the 1930s, I think it's really disappointing and inappropriate to compare government policy on immigration to events in Germany in the 1930s. It's important for the BBC to maintain impartiality if it is to retain the trust of the public who pay the licence fee.
Speaking outside his home this morning, Mr Lineker said he does not fear suspension from the BBC.
Do you regret the tweet, Gary? Do you fear getting suspended?
No, morning, mate. What are you doing?
Yes. Anything about the tweet, Gary?
Sorry, what
Do you
about
regret
it?
sending the tweet at all?
No.
Do you stand by what you said?
Sorry?
Do you stand by what you said in your tweet?
Of course.
The number of people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment has risen slightly, level with the previous record high. NHS England says around 7.2 million people were waiting to start treatment at the end of January. But the number of patients waiting longer than 18 months in the same period has decreased. A survey by the Royal College of Nursing shows a significant decline in the quality of patient care, as well as the well-being of nurses and midwives across England. The Prime Minister is looking to strengthen cooperation with France on tackling small boats in the English Channel. Rishi Sunak will meet French President Macron in Paris tomorrow. He is hoping to implement further measures to prevent illegal migrant crossings and target human trafficking gangs. It'll be the first UK-France summit in 5 years. Amber weather warnings for snow and ice are in place for parts of the UK this evening and overnight, but bringing with it a potential risk to life. Blizzards are due to cause treacherous conditions with 50-mile-per-hour winds and 40 centimetres of snow forecast for some areas. The Met Office is warning that power cuts are likely, as well as travel delays and cancellations. The coldest temperature in March in more than a decade was recorded in the Highlands overnight, dropping to a low of minus 16 degrees. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe, has been reconnected to Ukraine's energy grid after power was lost during Russian missile strikes. The plant was running on emergency diesel generators for the 6th time to prevent a potentially catastrophic meltdown. Ukraine's military says Russia fired 81 missiles, including 6 hypersonic missiles, on cities across the country. At least 9 people were killed in the strikes. The Prince and Princess of Wales have praised the communities who are fundraising for those impacted by earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. William and Kate visited a West London community centre to speak to aid workers who came back from the disaster zone. They were joined by 2 schoolgirls who made hundreds of origami cranes to raise funds for the appeal. Their visit comes as the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal has raised over £120 million in just 4 weeks. It's been confirmed that 25-year-old singer Mae Muller will represent the UK at this year's Eurovision Song Contest.
Instead I wrote a song about how you did me wrong. I could have cried at home and spent the night alone. Instead I wrote a song.
She will perform at the event in Liverpool with the track I Wrote a Song. The contest is being held in the Liverpool Arena on May the 13th on behalf of last year's winners, Ukraine. Miss Muller has described it as a dream. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Daniel Moylan is a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig, a former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome.
Evening,
Daniel, as per usual, you're like a chuntering uncle there throughout the Headlines, he wasn't happy, everybody, because the news report there was talking about centimetres.
Now, what's 40 centimetres of snow?
40
You tell me it's about a
40
foot.
centimetres.
Why doesn't he say about
I was
a foot?
demonstrating how big 40 centimetres was. I think it's about that.
Foot of snow. Everybody knows what a foot is. They've all got feet.
Everyone knows what 40 centimetres is as well. Well, apart from you. You know what 40 centimetres is.
Yeah, well, he's Labour.
Yeah.
So of course he knows.
Do you want to go back to shillings, Daniel? Is that it?
Well,
we're so devalued. The Bank of England has so devalued the currency that a shilling wouldn't be worth much now. It's hardly worth bothering.
Well, there you
what's
go.
at the bank, was it?
We was talking the other day, you're talking about old money. Do you remember we were talking about dog licences?
Yeah.
And they was all in old money. That wasn't it about 35?
37.5 pence.
Yeah, 37.5p. There you go. Jack has emailed in. Says, hi, Dewbs.
7 and 6pence.
I never miss GB News and I email all the time about all different topics, but I never get a mention. So from now on, I will watch, but I'm not ever going to email again. Best wishes, Jack. Well, there you go, Jack. Hopefully you'll email in again. And just so you know, I do mention this, but I do read all of your emails. I can't get around to all of them when I'm live on air because really my inbox is literally on fire. It doesn't stop. But I do throughout my evening. What a way I spend my nights. I read all of your comments, lots of them. I find interesting, engaging, and many of them actually make me laugh. And that is a hard task. So well done, all of you. Anyway, you know the drill. Don't you get in touch? gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Right. Let's move onward, shall we? The whole Lineker thing is still on the news agenda today, but to be honest, I think it's all a bit ridiculous. I'm a bit bored of talking about him, so if you don't mind, I'll just focus on a different angle, which is Suella Braverman. Did you see that she's been in the spot of bother? Because she sent this email basically to Tory supporters, or it's alleged that she sent it, had her name on the bottom anyway, saying that an activist blob of left-wing lawyers, civil servants and the Labour Party basically are trying to come together to stop the government making any inroads to stopping the Channel crossing. She basically says that she didn't know about this email, it wasn't her signature and all the rest of it. Anyway, calls now saying that she is basically in the wrong. She's breached this and that or the other. One of the unions, one of the heads of the unions is basically, he's saying he wants this investigation. It's told civil servants to make sure that they have kind of security precautions and all the rest of it. It's all getting a bit ridiculous if you ask me. But anyway, do you think she had a point?
Well, she may have had a point, but she didn't actually make it, because let's be absolutely clear, this email was sent out as a mass email by Conservative campaign headquarters, Conservative central office, as we used to call it. They put her name on it. They had no right to do so. They did not have her permission. She didn't know about it. Those are the facts, and nobody has actually disputed those facts.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do believe that.
Do you?
Because, I certainly believe that.
Because don't you think it sounds a little bit, she's got a backlash
separate.
and then saying,
No. I totally believe that. And that's the sort of way I'm afraid that central office, I can easily imagine them doing that. And they should be looking at what they did and I think apologising because they misrepresented her views. So that's the first thing, that's the fact. But then the question is, if she had made the point, would she have had a point to make? And I think it's undoubtedly the case that there are serious concerns about the impartiality of the civil service. We have the Sue Gray affair. There's still no account from Starmer of when he started talking with her. They've both gone stum on that, when we're entitled to know. We've got the fact that the Permanent Secretary of the Home Office is reported today in the papers having written round to his civil servants saying it's their job to challenge ministers. It's their job to work for ministers, by the way, not to challenge ministers necessarily. And they've got to challenge ministers, and you've got the trades unions representing the staff in the Home Office, not for the first time, threatening or actually taking the government to court over policies formulated by a democratically elected government. So my question is, who do these people think they are?
Do you know how many people there are? Do you know how many employees are in the civil service in the UK?
I think about 250,000.
How many do you think?
I should know, but I don't, Michelle. 300,000?
How many do you think at home? I'll give you the answer a bit later on. How many people do you think are employed by the civil service in the UK? He says 500,000. What do you say?
250.
No, double that.
You said
double that.
250,000.
Oh, so you're saying quarter. You're saying 250. What do you think?
500,000 upwards.
Well, there you go. That's your little test. I'll give you the answer a bit later on. And don't Google it, by the way. I don't like a cheat. Anyway, what do you make to the whole email? Do you think she's right to say that the civil servants are stifling, blocking the government's plans?
No, I mean, look, I'm going to try and take things in good faith that, you know, if she says she didn't sign it off and it was someone in Tory HQ, then I like to take people in good faith and I'll accept that. But this is... You know, the reason people get upset about it is because the recent leaked WhatsApp show what some Tory cabinet members say in private, right? I think you remember this week, Gavin Williamson, these teachers are always looking for an excuse to be lazy. So this speculation feeds that kind of mentality. And I think we have to be quite careful about saying the civil service is partial and not neutral, because the civil service, I think, is something we should be proud of as a country.
I'd like to be.
Yeah, and I think they contain, in fact, I know they contain people of all political persuasions. And their job is, they challenged the Labour government of the 97 to 2010. They challenge ministers to make good decisions. They test it, they push them. But at the end of the day, the civil service knows they have to execute the programme of the elected government. And I think some of this, the blob and lefty lawyers, is this government trying to distract people from its incompetence.
Incompetence?
Well, I don't think that's actually what's happening. I think that we've had 6 years come out, especially over Brexit, but it could have come out over other things. And we've seen, in my view, a collection of people, including very often leading civil servants, working against delivering the Brexit we voted for. Now, you can't put a name to those people while they're working for the civil service. But my God, you watch from the minute they leave the civil service, not the minute, because they've got a little gap, but after they've left the civil service and they're no longer under any obligation and they start to reveal their own views. Many of the senior ones are actually in the House of Lords, but they don't have to be in the House of Lords for us to find out what they've thought all the time. And they are not supportive, and they're still not supportive. I still don't hear people saying, I didn't vote for Brexit, but I really want Britain to be a success as an independent country outside the European Union.
You don't hear
No, I
them
don't
say
hear.
that.
All I ever hear them say is, in order for Britain to be a success, we need to stay really close to the European Union and follow their rules. That's all I ever hear people say.
Well, I would say, Daniel, the evidence of anybody deliberately obstructing Brexit, I think we'd have to get very specific and say, what is the evidence for it? And there's a really good point you raised about Sue Gray, OK? We need to get rid of the idea that senior people in the civil service don't have their own political views, or wherever, but it's how they don't let them interfere with the execution of their job.
Yeah, and we're not talking about that. What we're talking
you
about...
raised Sue Gray. You did.
I raised Sue Gray, and that's not the point about Sue Gray. The point about Sue Gray is what confidence can you have in the civil service when somebody as senior as that, who also, because she had that special job in charge of ethics, has access to all sorts of private information about cabinet ministers, immediately goes off without any break and goes and works without any sort of cleansing purgatorial break, goes off and works for the leader of the opposition in the run-up to a general election. How can you, I mean, that makes it even worse, but at any point, how can you possibly trust civil servants when they are so blatant in displaying party political affiliation when they haven't even left the job? How long was she discussing this?
But yeah, that's what I was about to ask you. The last I looked, Keir Starmer won't be transparent about the timeline of conversations and all the rest of it. Why not?
I don't know the detail of when that first started, but I think it's all a distraction.
Why won't he tell us?
Well, I don't actually know why, and I don't know the detail, and I think I saw a slightly uncomfortable interview on somewhere.
Does it strike you as odd?
No. What strikes me as odd is this big brouhaha, OK, that Sue Gray, I mean, no wonder she wants to go work for the Labour Party. She's having to be delving around the cesspit of around the administration led by your old boss, Boris, and she probably wants to go somewhere with ethics and a bit of, decency and honesty around it. The fact that she may well have had political views all along, but she executed that job was very difficult, and she did it in a fair way. And before it came out that she was going to go and work for Keir Starmer, people didn't criticise the Sue Gray report. They accepted it. But it's just, to me, it feels like a bit of a distraction.
You're making a different point.
I'm not.
You are. How can you trust the civil service? That's the point. How can you trust them to be politically neutral when she's that close to the Labour Party that she's in discussions for several months while still holding, I assume it was several months, we don't know, while holding a senior job, and proposes to go straight from one to the other, doesn't inform her terms and conditions mean she's subject to what's called the business appointment.
Yeah, it'll all get approved, Daniel.
She's meant to have told them when she was discussing the job. She didn't. She's gone. She still, yesterday, hadn't applied to them for permission to move. I mean, this isn't ethical behaviour.
Are we seriously questioning Sue Gray's ethics compared to, for example, Boris Johnson?
Oh, yeah.
Are you?
Perfectly happy
to
do that, yes.
Well, we're going to do a whole segment
Boris Johnson is a principled man.
Is he?
He's a principled man, a scholar and a gentleman.
Well,
Wow.
Boris Johnson is a principled man, a scholar and a gentleman, says Daniel. So
Well, he is.
I'm going to press pause on that note and I'm going to return to it. Is he? Do you agree with that sentiment?
He could say all that in ancient Greek as well, you see, which
He
Kevin and
probably
I
can,
couldn't.
actually. Yeah, he probably can. Well, there you go. That is your task. I want you, don't forget your question. I've asked you how many people are in the civil service. That is, I want your answers. 250,000, he reckons. More so, says Kevin. And what was it you just summarised Boris Johnson as being?
As a man of principle, a scholar and a gentleman.
In one word, do you agree with that?
No.
Right, well, there you go. We're going to find out why in 3.
He's written books. But you haven't.
So's Al Capone.
I've written a book. Anyway, what we're doing, I thought we was going to a break. We're sitting here looking...
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604, Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you
I'll
are.
put that as my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
A man of principle, scholar and a gentleman. Who are we talking about? I'll tell you in a second. I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Daniel Moylan is alongside me. He's a Tory peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig is a former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR. Lots of you guys have just been getting in touch about that last topic, Suella Braverman, whether or not she's in breach of a code of conduct or not. So many of you are basically just saying, pack it in, leave her alone, Bev says. To be fair, she's probably right. The Home Office are lazy, in Bev's view. All of them? Do you know how many they are? I haven't told you yet, but I will. So many of you have been quite harsh to the civil servants. Are any of you watching this perhaps working as civil servants? What do you think when you hear people saying that you're lazy, that you're kind of trying to frustrate outcomes and all the rest of it? How does that make your morale? Gordon says, Michelle, the civil service is like an episode of Yes, Minister. William says, why are you basically criticising Suella Braverman? She is one of the few politicians that I respect. It's not me, William. It's the union leader that represents the civil servants. Dave Penman is called. He's saying that the emails are a direct attack on the integrity and impartiality. You've got the Lib Dems calling for an investigation on it. So, yeah, it's not me. I'm just merely debating the goings-on of the day. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. Many of you have been getting in touch about the civil servants. A million, says one person. Alan says, whatever the number is, the answer should be about half of it. Philip says, you're asking the wrong question. I don't care how many are employed. I'd like to know how many of them are actually doing any work. Christine, you are absolutely spot on. And I don't believe that you haven't Googled that because it's quite an obscure figure and you've got it down to the exact, so I think you might have Googled that. No one else has got it right so far. I'll tell you a bit later on what the answer is. Now, a man of principle, scholar and a gentleman, that was the words we opened the show with. We are talking about, did you guess? Boris Johnson. And get this, it's come under criticism today. It's always coming under criticism, isn't he, quite frankly? But anyway, he's only spoken in the House of Commons, do you know how many times since September? 16 times. You should know that, by the way, because I said it in my intro, so if you didn't know, you've not been paying attention. Anyway, he has raked in millions and millions of pounds delivering speeches across the world. And some, Kevin, are saying, what's going on? Never mind his speeches all around the world. If you're only speaking 16 times, you're not doing your job, your primary job, as the MP.
Well, he can't be. But Boris is very money motivated. You know, he used to struggle on getting by on 300 grand a year when he was Prime Minister. You know, it was when our hearts bled from chicken feed. Blah 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 blah. How can I survive this? You know, and so he's out of touch. And you know, he's getting paid 200 grand for a speech here, another one 250 there. Now, all Prime Ministers do this. There's balance, right, and context. When they leave office, they can earn huge amounts of money. But why does Boris still bother being a Member of Parliament? I mean, we'll ask Daniel because he used to work for him, but he's not, you know, Boris Johnson, his own former ministers called him somebody who presided over a culture of lies and deceit. People call him a liar and he doesn't sue them. You know, he's not an honest person. And how long have you got to discuss where he's been found not to have told the truth? That's a special. For what it's worth, by the way, I did a live show in his seat. I can't remember what it was, actually. I was there.
Oh, was you there?
Yes.
Oh, right.
Made an impact, obviously.
Well, I was just thinking, how long ago was it? It feels like a lifetime ago, but it perhaps wasn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you was there, then you will remember the point I was about to make, which is when I asked the audience, his constituents, who here likes Boris Johnson, pretty much all of them put their hands up.
Michelle, were we at the same gig?
I think so.
No, one of us is misrememberring that.
That'll be you.
Well...
So you're telling me that when we asked those people, they didn't put their hands up?
They did not, no.
Right. Well, I know what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to go onto YouTube and you can watch us live in Uxbridge as we was, and I'm going to watch that back because I hope I'm not making it up, but if I am, that means I'm dreaming positively about Boris, which would be a bit odd. Daniel, what do you make then to what Kevin's
I
been
think
saying?
this is just absolutely hilarious because up until now, most of the people attacking Boris, since he's ceased to be Prime Minister, have been saying, shut up. Every time he's in the newspaper, you see all over Twitter, what are you going to say? Go away and die. They don't want to hear from Boris. They want him to die and go away.
No.
Now they've had that gig, and now the next one is they're going to say, well, why aren't you speaking more often? Why aren't you in the House of Commons making speeches? Let me just tell you something about the House of Commons, a bit like the House of Lords. You're not actually encouraged to make speeches in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, because if we all stood up on our hind legs and spoke as frequently as we might want to, nobody would ever get home and no business would ever get done. So 16 times doesn't seem to me too few. The real question is he a good constituency MP? Does he look after the correspondence that comes in from his constituents, the individual casework, as we call it, the people who write to him with problems, do they get answers? Does he make inquiries on their behalf? Of course, he has staff helping him to do that. Every MP does. Staff paid for by the authorities, by Parliament. But does he do that? Does he go to his constituency? Is he there on a Friday, which he very frequently is, I happen to know? Does he attend surgeries? Does he look after people? That's what a constituency MP is meant to do. And I know some of them love standing up all the time and talking in the House of Commons, but actually, when you look at the benches very often on the telly, there's nobody listening to them. And that is not the measure of an MP's success, worth or value. Boris remains a truly iconic, very, very significant figure in British politics. He is the person. He is the person who the Labour Party is absolutely terrified.
Well, he's going to respond to that in a second. But is he iconic for the right reasons?
He's iconic for the right reasons because he's the person who actually the first politician, the first leader of a political party for decades, who had a direct personal connection with people and who they felt was authentic and responded to them. And anyone who denies that
you would
just
agree with
misunderstands
that,
what Boris's appeal is.
Would you agree with that sentiment, that he appealed to the public like no other?
No, not uniquely so. I mean, there have been other very, very popular charismatic prime ministers, such as, well, Tony Blair, Margaret Thatcher. These are good examples. You know, polling suggests, right, I hate to bring facts into it, that a majority of the British public think that Boris is a liar. Right, that there are opinion polls on that subject.
That's because they've been fed a lot of lies.
Well, you know, and I respect that. You know, you're very loyal, and I respect that. And you know, you did some very good things in London government.
But he says the Labour Party, you're terrified of him.
Absolutely
you're
not.
by him.
No, I tell you what, the Labour Party is worried about. Here's something which is very true. The Labour Party is conscious of and worried that a large number of people have lost total faith in politics, right? So I know about some internal polling recently that shows a significant number of people in this country think that politicians are all the same. They're dispirited, they're demoralised. Indeed. I suspect Labour's lost your vote forever, though, but I think Labour's focusing...
Not necessarily.
OK.
I'm not that, you know, I'm not so kind of, I'll never vote for that. I'm not like a robot. Yeah. If Labour was the party that came up with the things that I felt were the right direction for the company, I wouldn't be adverse to considering them the way that I would consider anyone. But right now, I probably wouldn't vote if there was one tomorrow.
Well, you're not alone in that. And so what Labour is terrified is not Boris, because I actually think... And the reason that Boris is no longer Prime Minister, he had the largest number of resignations in living memory of any serving Prime Minister. His own side had enough. Now, Labour are not scared of Boris. They do know... And this is total honesty, that number one, people are disillusioned with politics, and number two, that people want over the next year and a half to hear more about what Labour's going to do. Criticising is fine.
We'd all like to hear what Labour's going to do.
And it will, but...
What are they going to do about the small boats, for example?
Well, fine that you asked that, and there's a plan. Keir Starmer mentioned it at PMQs this week. But what's
the headline of the plan?
Well, the headline of the plan is work more closely with France, get value for money. Well, did we... I have to say, finally... hang on.
Anyway, yeah, actually,
Rishi,
give us the plan, because I didn't let you give the plan.
Well, the plan that Keir Starmer talked about at PMQs this week is all about more officers to process the paper backlogs. It's made a big difference. Closer liaison with our French counterparts and actually just engaging more with the system. Now, I have to be fair again to Rishi, right? He's actually made more progress on this than anyone has for ages.
Only by giving away Northern Ireland to the European Union.
Ah, really? That's wow. Do you think that?
Yeah, I do. I think this deal, I'm one of the only people saying it, but I'm happy to say I think this withdrawal agreement, lipstick on the pig stuff.
You're not the only person saying that. I've heard other folks say the same.
Windsor framework, whatever it's called, is a complete sellout.
Well,
and if it comes to a vote in the House of Lords, and it may not,
but
I will vote against it.
I do find the Labour plan for these birds, just touch on it briefly, what you would say quite interesting, because it's so easy to criticise. This situation of the Channel is an absolute mess, and if it was easy to deal with it, it would have been dealt with ages ago, and obviously, clearly, it's not. But then when I hear the Labour plan, as recited by you there, everything's already been tried and tested. So, right, we're going to work more closely with France. Well, we've been doing that. We've been giving them tens of millions of quid. We've got pretty much nothing for it. We're going to have more resources. And to me, I just don't see... I was bored the other day. I need to get a much more interesting home life, I think. And I did a calculation, right? In 5 years... I don't know why I'm interested in figures tonight. I don't know what's gone on with me. It's not like me. But anyway, in 5 years, the number of people on small boats crossings has gone up 15,000%. So the number in 5 years, it's gone up 15,000% from 299 that crossed in 2018 to 45,755 people in 2022. So when everyone talks about resources, I don't understand what it is that you think people should do. Do you just have this warehouse of asylum-seeking, processing people, and you just, every single day, you keep recruiting these people more and more and more, and you never stop because the number's increasing so much?
It needed, for years, the focus that's now being brought to bear on it. That's the fact. And the opposition's job is to say, you have been in charge for 13 years. And it's all right now on this Conservative Party note that's gone out this week, our 5 priorities. It's just fair to point out that only now, I think, do people, whatever their politics, feel that the Prime Minister is focused on it. Before, I mean, we all know the government's been so distracted by internal fighting. Boris did he really apply himself to this, to be honest? Do we think he did?
Whether he applied himself to it or not, the point is that the government's come up with a plan and the Labour Party is not supporting it. That's the key thing.
Well, we'll see about that. Let's see what happens in the House of Commons.
Just a quick yes or no to this, because I need to move on to another subject, right? If the Labour Party, so if it was a general election tomorrow, right, so all things are equal, but the Labour Party, so Keir Starmer, was going up against Rishi Sunak, or I'm playing like, you know, make-believe now, but imagine that Boris Johnson was the leader of the Tories. Do you think Keir Starmer would stand a better chance of winning if his opponent was Starmer or Johnson?
Well, do you want a surprisingly frank answer and honest?
Go on.
Statistics show that Sunak is a marginally harder opponent.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting.
Whether you believe it or not, I'm telling you that in good faith.
I always believe every word that comes out of your mouth, except perhaps the thing about Uxbridge a minute ago. But that might just be missed or separate recollections. But I will Google that, but recollections may vary. By the way, are you one of Boris Johnson's constituents? Do you live in the area where he is indeed your MP? Do you like him? Do you rate him? Do you think people having a pop at him are deeply unfair? Or do you think he's letting you down and focus too much on the big dollar? Which leads me nicely, lots of you getting in touch on that, and I'll read some of those out in just a second, but the big dollar leads me nicely to ask you this. Do you think we should have more of a wealth tax, if you like, on the wealthy? Biden, he says absolutely yes, that's what he wants to do in his country. He wants to put a levy of 25% on America's billionaires. Should we follow suit?
Only for Gary Lineker.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Daniel Moylan, the Tory peer in the House of Lords, is alongside me, as is Kevin Craig, the former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR. Welcome back, everybody. I got an email, and it did really make me chuckle, so it did. I've just been reading it in the break, and it says, hang on one sec, because I've got the slowest phone in the world, but I'm too tight to buy a new one, I've got to be honest. It says, it's from Graham, and he says, Michelle, thank goodness that you've got Lord David there, as opposed to that out-of-date, misinformed PR bloke. I don't even know where to begin with that. He's on about Braverman, but I just have to say, you're not out-of-date, misinformed PR bloke, and you are not Lord David. So I've got to be frank there, Graham. A little bit more attention needs paying by you there, got to say. Bill says, Michelle, did I hear you right at the start of this programme? Men in Scotland to be jailed for a long time if they brag about their sexual conquests? Yes, that is the cut and thrust of the potential being explored over in Scotland, and I'll be coming to that story before the end of the programme. Bill, you sound a bit worried about that. We'll be getting into it before 7 o'clock, worry not. Andrew says, finally, we have a Home Secretary that speaks the truth. And as for the civil servants, all I can say is that the truth must hurt. Avril says, Michelle, I was a civil servant for 20 years and it was the hardest job I've ever done. And by the way, she says, I've had a few jobs in my day. She says, though, when she was a civil servant, not a minute was wasted. She worked in the DWP on telephones, huge workloads, and she says, not a brilliant wage either. I wonder, though, what's your morale like? That's what I was pondering. When you do hear people criticising you, do you think it's fair or not? What else are people saying? Boris, Valerie says, give Boris the red card along with Gary Lineker. Wendy says Boris is, and it's capital, so she means business. Boris is a gentleman and he's trustworthy. Mike says he's thoroughly principled and honourable. David says, Lord Moynihan, that's better. That's better than Graham. Lord Moynihan is right. Boris Johnson is principled, educated and a gentleman. I nearly made a comment that could possibly have got me sued, and I managed to stop myself there, so I'm impressed with myself. Martin says he's absolutely entitled to earn all of his money. It's just the socialist on your panel hates Boris. And quite frankly, it's because they're all scared of him. Well, speaking about earning money, US President Joe Biden has put a controversial tax proposal to Congress. Get this, everyone. He wants to put a levy of 25% on America's billionaires. It probably won't get through, but it's got a lot of people thinking. Do you think we should perhaps tax our wealthy, our billionaires, that little bit more? Thoughts, Daniel?
How many billionaires have we got?
Don't know, do you?
I don't know, not many.
Oh, right.
And we'd have fewer, wouldn't we? In fact, they'd all have gone.
Really? So you think if you're a billionaire...
There comes a point, where, isn't there, where you say, sod this for a game of soldiers, I'm going to take my money somewhere else. And we can't stop them doing that. So I think moderate and sensible, moderate taxation always brings in more money in the end than punitive rates. We had, when I was a child, tax on income was 98% at the margin for unearned income and 75% for earned income. Of course, people stopped working or they found lots of tax dodgers. So we then get more complexity in the tax laws for people going around it. One of the best things that happened under Mrs. Thatcher was bringing the top rate of income tax down from 75% to 40% over a number of years, and tax revenues boomed. We actually had surpluses in those years.
Do you know how many billionaires there are in this country?
I don't. I'd love to. Do you know?
I do.
Oh, come on then.
177.
In this country.
Apparently.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's 177
That's
people.
quite a lot. I wouldn't have thought it was. But I wouldn't have thought it was that
I thought it was a couple of hundred. Some of them will be foreign people who've come to live here. And we've got some homegrown billionaires. I believe Sir Jim Ratcliffe is a famous businessman who's made money here. He's worth more than $1 billion. Why do we want to drive him out of the country? I don't know. The others can just leave. They can take, up sticks and go. What on earth do we think we'd be achieving by doing this?
It'd make lots of people that are not wealthy feel better about themselves.
Well, we could give them a happy pill if that's all it's about. Give them all a happy pill.
Well, sorry, Dan, I found that quite a funny suggestion, but I think this is really interesting, right, where it's coming from, because in America, one of the reasons that Biden was elected, in my personal view, thank heavens, is that he managed to bring together a more equitable society with the politics of aspiration and a desire to get on. And this policy, well, in my view, right, Daniel's making very big faces at me over there.
Don't make big faces, it's the loudest view.
So I think this is interesting because, the headline, the 25% tax on billionaires, this comes from following the idea of the wealth tax, which has had some discussion in recent years. And I think you have to be quite careful about it so that you don't disincentivise people who want to build businesses and create wealth. But at the same time, there is a huge inequality in terms of, Western societies, never mind globally. The rich, through the pandemic, got richer and the poorer got poorer. Now, really, can billionaires anywhere on earth afford to pay more tax? Probably yes.
But billionaires are quite philanthropic as well, aren't they?
Many are amazing. Bill Gates, incredible. So many of them, Michelle, to be fair, don't need a tax regime to do more good with their wealth.
Yeah, because that's the bit that I find. When it's kind of, to me, it is, I do always feel like politics of envy because you have so many people that actually, they have like the giving pledge or whatever they call it. So they do an awful lot of good. Yeah, they do an awful lot of good with their hard-earned cash. They'd pay an enormous amount of tax on it already. So for me, it's kind of like, take more off them, take more off them, take more off them. And I remember someone writing in on my show once, and he said, it was something along the lines of, I work at whatever supermarket or wherever it was, and he said, I only earn £13,000 a year or whatever it was. And he was saying, so absolutely, the wealthy need to pay a lot more to help support people like me. Well, and he says that's it. And you agree with that?
I am very interested in it. I want to see more in the detail of this. And as you say, it may not get through the various legislative processes in the States. But I do identify, and I feel very strongly, I only came off being a councillor in London last year, and, of people's struggles to survive. And so there is an interest in fair taxation.
Yeah, this wouldn't raise any money. It wouldn't raise any money, because it's a very small number of people and half of them would decamp somewhere else anyway. And what this is...
Well, then it would raise money then, wouldn't it? So if you're saying let's just round it up, 200 people, it's not, but just say 200, 100 of them in your maths go. Yeah. So that means you're going to tax 100, so you're going to raise something.
You'd raise something that it wouldn't buy anything. The amount of money would be quite small. The main thing is we are getting to a point where we can't afford, as a country, the constant demand for free services in this country. And this is a way of the left distracting from it. They're always looking for this magic money tree out there. There's free money lying on the ground if you only went and got it, and nobody would suffer if you went and got it. The money isn't there. If it's that easy to pick up, somebody would have thought about this before. And as for Biden got elected on a platform of unifying, that's true, but not the country, unifying his own Democratic Party, which is split between a few remaining moderates and some very extreme left-wing people, much more extreme than you are. And this is a bid to keep the extremists, and that's quite saying something, and this is a bid to keep the extremists in his own party happy. he doesn't even want to implement.
If you're listening on the radio, you do miss out on some wonderful facial gestures whilst things are being said on this show. You
Can
really
I come back on that, Michelle?
If it's brief, you can. Go on.
Well, just very briefly, I think Biden got elected because people were fed up at the lack of morality and integrity at the highest levels of government. It makes me think of another country, but I just can't think where.
Oh, well, you can think about it. You can have a couple of minutes to think about it because Bill, you might remember, was pondering. Michelle, what did you say earlier on? Was you saying that over in Scotland, men could potentially be jailed for boasting about their sexual exploits? Yes, I did say that. You didn't miss it, and I will be getting into it. Are you worried?
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Daniel Moylan is the Tory peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig is a former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR. They are keeping me company until 7 o'clock. Right, Scottish men, listen up, or all men, quite frankly. Are you partial to a little bit of boasting about your sexual exploits? Perhaps in public to your mates? Well, you might want to pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because proposals are being put forward now for new so-called misogyny offences. This has been proposed by the SNP. They want to outlaw abusive and humiliating behaviour, which apparently stops women, I quote, fully participating in society. This could see someone indulging in one of those acts, like, I don't know, whether it's watching porn in public, talking about your sex life in public, whatever it is. He could be facing up to 7 years in jail if this all gets pushed through. Thoughts, Daniel?
Well, first of all, it is true that more women are injured and killed by men than men are injured and killed by women.
Yeah.
And that's the important fact underlying this, and that can never be wholly acceptable. Never be acceptable at all, sorry, is what I mean. That can't be acceptable. But from that, a load of people have drawn the conclusion that what you've got to do is change the behaviour of men, not in terms of their violent behaviour, but in terms of their speech, their thinking, their behaviour and stuff like that. There's a big push to change the Equality Act, which is a UK act, so as to make misogyny, which is hatred of women, to make misogyny a crime and to make being a woman what's called a protected characteristic. Now, in Scotland, they can't change the Equality Act, it's a UK act, so they can have to have their own legislation. And that's what they're driving at here. But the moment you say we're going to have an act to do this, you have to say, well, what does misogyny look like? What's the behaviour that we are going to outlaw? And so you come up with a long list of stuff.
Which I can tell you, it's stuff like if a man shouts sexually abusive remarks at a woman in the street, to a girl who does not want to be chatted up. I mean, how would you know? I mean,
they want to make wolf whistling, for example, illegal. Now, maybe wolf whistling might not be acceptable. I understand all of that.
It isn't.
But I think it's quite flattering.
No.
Sorry, I know that I'm really going against the stereotype and all the rest of it.
When you start to engage the criminal law with this, you set up a series of crimes which people, in the end, stop respecting the law.
Kevin?
Look, you know, as Daniel says, there is huge problems with the number of women suffering partner abuse in Scotland. You know, 1 in 5, 12% of women experience stalking, harassment, 16% of women experience sexual victimisation. Men are never going to get banged up for loudly boasting about their sexual conquest. And in Scotland, the SNP will eventually learn, as they saw recently, that if you bring in legislation that is out of step with what the population is broadly thinking, there'll be political consequences. And the reality is there is a problem about misogyny, but it's never going to happen. I'm telling you that now, that men are going to get locked up for boasting and speaking in a vulgar manner. It's so extreme, it won't happen. But there is a problem about how women are treated.
Well, it used to be the case that you'd have said not long ago that you wouldn't get a visit from the police if you said in your workplace that a man was a woman and a woman said they were man wasn't a woman.
Well, those examples are so infrequent and they get blown up out of proportion, and I agree it's wrong.
So these will be infrequently locked up.
It's a slippery slope.
People will be infrequently locked up for wolf whistling.
Are you a woman at home watching or listening? What do you think? Do you get wolf whistled? I mean, I have to say it's much less of a thing these days. Or maybe I'm just getting older and more unattractive, so I don't notice it anymore. But I do think it's getting less of a thing. And are you a woman? What do you think? Do you find it deeply offensive if some guy wolf whistles to you, or do you get flattered? I suppose, and I know I shouldn't say this really, but I guess it depends what the guy looks like, and that's really awful and not very feminist to admit. But, you know, if it was someone like David Beckham, perhaps, you know what? Sometimes in life you just need to stop dirty before you dig yourself into a massive hole. So look at the time, everyone. Wonderful. Thank you very much for that timekeeping. Right, I shall stop there. By the way, the number of civil servants, did you get it right? 510,000.
Oh, well done, Kevin.
Well
done, Kevin. First, you got something right.
On the money.
That's it. That's all I've got time for, thankfully, before I dug a hole that was too big. Have a good night. Thank you, gents, and I'll see you back at the same time tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. We have issued amber weather warnings for parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England and Wales. Heavy snow continuing to fall here into the night. This area of low pressure is responsible. The winds also picking up as the wet weather moves in, hitting the cold air. That's where we're seeing the heaviest snowfall, starting to turn more to rain over parts of the Midlands this evening. But as I say, for Wales, parts of Northern England and Northern Ireland, heavy snow will continuing, blown around by gusty winds, some atrocious travelling conditions. Power issues are also possible, as well as the potential for some rural communities to be cut off by 10 to 20 centimetres of snow, maybe over the hills of northern England, 40 centimetres of snow. In the south, it's mostly rain because it's milder here. Further north across Scotland, most places dry, but it could be icy in northern Scotland and it will again be well below freezing here on Friday. The snow easing by the morning over Northern Ireland and steadily petering out over northern England and Wales through the morning as well, but still further sleet and snow likely over eastern England well into Friday, and then steadily pushing a little further south, blown along by a cold wind. For many further west, it's a bright, fine day tomorrow, lots of sunshine. But of course, there'll still be quite a bit of snow lying on the ground, and it will feel cold at 4 or 5 Celsius, a colder feel in the south after things have turned a bit milder today. Look at this, the blue taking hold of the chart on Friday evening. There will be a hard frost across the country for the start of the weekend. Further snow showers coming in across northern Scotland. Again, potentially quite icy here. Still, for many, Saturday will be another bright, fine day. As we go through the morning, though, the cloud will thicken with outbreaks of rain coming into southwest England, some hill snow for Wales and later for Northern Ireland. Many central and eastern parts will be dry through the day, but as this wet weather moves further north, the potential for a bit more snow to arrive on Saturday night across parts of Scotland and northern England. Goodbye.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m,